everyone. I'm going to try something today. I don't know if this is going to work because I am outdoors and I've got no stand for my phone, so I'm going to just try holding on to it. But I've got my travel kit with me and I'm playing around with gouache because I've just been out and about doing a lot of hiking and stuff and having fun with a gouache set. And so I'm going to have you look over my shoulder here as I do a little plein air painting. There is my setup, my little portable stuff. I've got an Etchr Satchel here, which is kind of a cool travel artist backpack sort of setup. And I've got my watercolor pad with it's very rough cold press paper, but I love it because it gives me some great textures for some of this rough stuff that I'm working on. And I've got a small little jar of water. I carry this around empty and I have a little squirt bottle that I pour the water into here for. And I have my gouache colors. This is what I've been using so far in my other images, but I have a whole set of gouache right there at my feet. So I've got all these other colors as well. And this over here is the scene that I wanted to try to address today. It's going to be a little quick painting, but it's kind of fun to do this out and about. Oh, now what am I sitting on? Well, I've got this, like, I don't know if you can see it. It's a tripod little chair. It's really handy because it folds up and it's about 12 inches by 3 circumference. And so it's great because I can just carry that around with me when I'm traveling. And it makes for a nice little place to sit down if I ever get tired. I've sketched out something very, very, very rough. Basically, I just wanted a tall, thin piece, and I've sketched my horizon line and a few of the little tree branches. I'm not too worried about exactitude with this sketch because I just want to get started painting and letting the textures do their things. Oh, and I've got a whole lot of colors just in this little palette. I'm going to start off with a bunch of the golds and yellow colors because that's predominantly what I see here. There's a lot of grass, a whole lot of grass, and most of it dead and dried. All right. I hope I don't make you guys motion sick with my movements as I do this because, as I said, I am solo and hand holding this camera as I go, which is a brand new experience for me. Well, I mean, I guess not the solo part. That's pretty usual when it comes to art making. But holding a camera while I'm doing it and talking and doing a whole painting. Even if it is a mini painting. All right. Got lots of yellows. I wanted some variations. That's why I used multiple kinds of yellows. And I also was not super picky about what colors it mixed with in my little palette over here, which has tons of other stuff. Now some of that sky, which is, well, it's very cloudy day, so cloudy and hazy. So mostly it is a very grayish white sky with just the hint of, well, not even, just a tiny little hint of a bluish tone to it. And I am painting over this entire upper third of the piece with my sky tone. I've mixed just a tiny bit of blues and greens and gray so that I've got this neutrally cool toned stuff over here. I'm blending that into the horizon grass. Alright, so now I've got something that looks very modern art-esque right now. It's a yellow field with a pale sky. That would be a perfect modern title for it as well, wouldn't it? But now I'm going to go spoil all that by adding a tree. Oh, wait. I'm going to add some of this scrub brush that's also nearby. Got some greenish things over there. You see this again? I'm talking about, let me see, that and, you know, those areas. What have I got? So just a little bit over here. And little patches over here. And then I'm going to blend the bottoms downward into the grass. Now what I've got here is this mixture of burnt umber, Prussian blue, and black. And I'm just mixing that up to give myself something to work with. And I'm going to switch over to a smaller brush. Also, in that interim, I was waiting for stuff to dry a little bit, because now that I'm going to paint on top of it, it's better to have the initial layer dry so that the colors actually stand out. Otherwise, they sort of all kind of... I mean, it's not like watercolors where it'll bleed, but things just sort of blend outward into a much less distinguished and softened mass, so that you don't get really as much distinct coloration. And I've switched over to my tiniest brush as well. This is a size 0, and you have to kind of twirl and twiddle it around in order to get your point when you're using gouache, because gouache is thick. It's kind of creamy in its consistency, and if you just dip it in like you do with watercolor, you end up with globs of paint on your brush that don't make for... I mean, it's good for some things, like in the initial stages of this when I was doing the sky and the grass. It's perfect for that. I just want this globby paint that I can smear all over the place. But now that I'm getting down to this detailed branch work on this tree, I want something that I can control more and that stays more within the, well, that gives me a finer point. I'm getting some more brown because my mixture here is tending too much towards the grayish blue, which is, it's fine also. I mean, sometimes it's really nice to sort of exaggerate the colors that you see so that it really emphasizes the coloration, especially when you work on shadows. You know, getting a lot of blues and deeper, vibrant tones in those shadows can be very effective. In a painting. It's not, might not be exactly what you see, but it's more of the feel of what you're seeing, you know? That's what art is. It's kind of reinterpretation of life and taking the best elements of what's in front of you and turning it into a visual representation that you've created with paint and paper and water. It's the alchemy of art making. Lots of thin branches that this tree has on the outer edges. And just sort of letting my brush trail in these tickling little lines along the paper. It can be a little bit difficult on this cold press paper, but I think for the other effects that the cold press has, especially on this plein air and gouache type of painting, it's worthwhile to use it. At least I have been really enjoying it. Now I think there are a bunch of nests in the upper branches of this tree. It looks like a lot of tiny little nests, I think. Let me see if I can zoom in on that so you guys can check it out. Up there, you see all those little dark spots? I think those are nests. You can hear some of the birds out there too. It's pretty nice out here. Oh, by the way, I should tell you where I actually am. I'm in Point Reyes right now. Point Reyes, California. It's a national park area. It is gorgeous, and the wildlife density here is more than anywhere else that I have ever been, despite the amount of human traffic that comes through here, because there's so many people out and about. And I'm here on a weekday. I don't even want to know what it's like on weekends when everyone else is freed from the shackles of a 9 to 5 job. Adding a few little spots of color to these bushes. Speckled light and shadow. That's with the darker tones. Let's add some lighter colors to it as well. Need more light. I find I need to mix in a lot of white with gouache, and then it kind of gets too chalky, so you have to kind of go back and forth with finding just the right mixture of stuff to get the color and effect that you want. Dotting in some stuff there. I got a little bit more white because one of the things I really love to do is to pull in negative space with lighter colors, particularly around trees when I paint them. I don't know, something about the effect of that. I just love how it looks. And also my sky here seems to get a tad darker as it dried. So I'm going to go back in here and sort of, it helps to refine some of the branches as well as I do this. I can taper them more as I'm painting the negative space around them. Maybe some of the globby bits that got out of control can be tamed. But I find sometimes with gouache, it has an opposite effect from watercolors in a way, where when it dries, my colors become darker, or maybe it's that they become more muted. Whereas in watercolors, as the colors dry, they become lighter because the liquid gets soaked into the paper and you lose some of the vibrance that is an illusion of it being wet. You have to make sure that you're consistent with this as you do it, so that you don't have some negative spaces that are lighter than others. It doesn't have to all be the same, but you know, if you have some really bright spots like I'm doing right over here at the base of the tree, which I like to do because that really pulls the silhouette into focus, really provides some contrast, and that's what's going to draw your viewer's eyes to that area when you finish. So what I was saying was that, you know, even though I'm making this part really bright in the areas just around the tree, as I move away from the tree, I have to be consistent about that and let it fade out to the not so bright areas so that it's not such a noticeable transition. Keeping it so it's more gradual. Right, I like that. Add a few little highlights into the tree itself. Just a little bit. Okay, now some of the grassy highlights, grassy bits. I'm just doing these very loose, quick strokes with my brush, letting it just skim over the surface. Yeah, I can't let it get too globby, otherwise my grass starts to look chunky, and I don't want that. In fact, I'm going to switch over to my small brush because that brush was too big for this. And you have to get the paint to the right consistency. Too thick and you get globby, and too thin and it will just fade into obscurity once it dries. And the grasses in the forefront are going to be longer than the ones in the background. Kind of vary the directions that all these grasses are growing, because that's how they are. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a reverse of what I did up in the upper tree part, you know, where I was doing the negative space of white. And I'm going to do negative space of darker tones around some of these lower grasses. And that really serves to accentuate the shadowy bits around them. Then I'm going to take my larger brush with some liquid and blend that a little bit so it's not so stark. Oh, wind blowing. Wind blowing, not good. Whew. Okay. Gotta hold on to my page here with my pinky as I'm doing this blending. Alright. I think I'm pretty much done with this. So there we go, guys. That was a fun little bit to do. And I hope you enjoyed watching that. Hey, one final thing here. I wanted to quickly go over what is in my travel kit that I use when I was out there painting. Now that I'm back at home and I don't have wind blowing away my materials, I can give you a better overview of everything that you saw. So the first thing is my seat. This is super handy for giving me a nice perch. It is a outdoor sort of portable tripod stool. It looks like this when it's all folded up, but it's fairly sturdy. You just lock in the legs like that. They just slide into place. They normally slide into place easily. There we go. And then the seat opens up like this, and it's a sort of tripod base so that you have a nice stable thing to perch on and the top, and you just sit in there. It's like a bicycle seat type of shape. So that's great for when I don't have a bench or the ground is kind of dirt and I want something to set up at. All right, next up are my paints. I have, this is like a cheap little makeup bag. And I have a jar, small little 2 or 3 ounce jar, I believe. I like to have a lid because once I've used it, I can close it up and dispose of my water when I'm back at home. And I have a little squirt bottle of water in case I need extra. And then I have my handy dandy mini palettes, which some of you may remember from my Kickstarter earlier this year. These are tiny little porcelain palettes that are very travel sized. You can carry a lot of pigments. This is watercolor. What you saw me using in the video was gouache. I'll go over that a little bit more in just a second. I bring my entire gouache kit of all the tube colors because it's something that, well, gouache is something that I've just recently started delving into. I'm primarily a watercolor artist. So this actually is a very handy little size. I can bring it with me, but it's also good enough for most of my day-to-day usage of watercolor paints, which is awesome because it has a tiny little footprint so that it doesn't take up a whole lot of space on your desk, and also in my limited space when I'm out there painting plein air, it also doesn't take up much space there. So I've got all my little palettes. Next up, let's look into this satchel that I've got. This is called the Etchr Satchel. Etchr, you can see the brand right there. It's an Australian company that started via Kickstarter a couple years ago, and they make these great, very highly customizable artist drawing bags, basically drawing and painting bags for when you're out and on the move and you want something where you can have a nice surface to do your work on that's portable and doesn't and also holds all your stuff. So this was actually my first time taking this thing for a whirl because it is so highly customizable that it was a little intimidating at first, but I'm so glad that I got around to doing it because it was perfect for this trip and for this purpose. You can see I've got all my brushes over here on this side. Pencils and brushes and my pens, although mostly what I ended up using were just these few items when I was actually out there painting, but I didn't know which ones I would need, so it was nice to have everything all nicely organized over there. Now I have these few items, which were what you saw me using in the video. I have a size 0 brush, a size 2 brush, and a larger flat one. And these were pretty much all I needed for working in something the size of this little sketchbook, and my pencil, of course. Didn't bother with my eraser, although that is here on the other side of my satchel in case I needed to use it. And then I have my actual sketchbook, which is also nicely fitted into here because, you know, you can move these around. These are great. They're these little Velcro tabs. You can just stick them anywhere you want. So I used one of them over here to hold on to my brushes that I had on the side. And then I have 4 at the corners of my sketchbook here to keep it from blowing away in the wind or falling off or sliding when I was working. And so this just kind of all folds underneath when you're working with it.
And it can become much more flatter, but right now I'm just going to, well, actually, let me do this. I will unbuckle these straps because this is in backpack mode currently, so that I could carry it with me as I went, as I was hiking, because I had gone, I walked like 10 miles with this thing at some point to hike to a spot that I wanted to paint. And you can see here are some of the other plein air paintings that I did while on this trip. Here's the one that you watched me paint in the video, this guy over here. And what I did was I just set up my little palettes up on the resting against the top of my sketchbook, and I had my water here as well. And so this way, you know, nothing was moving, nothing was sliding around. The wind kind of flipped my pages a little bit, but there's actually a solution that the Etchr Satchel has for keeping your pages open to what you would like. I didn't pack that with me for this trip because I didn't think I would need it, but in the future I might do that, seeing as when the wind started blowing it got a little bit tricky to just hold on to everything and make sure my wet paint wasn't getting flipped over. Oh, and one final thing I wanted to talk about was the gouache that I used. It's also stored in here. Now, as I said, I brought my whole pack of all the tubes, and in the future, I think that once I get more accustomed to working with gouache, what I might do, once I get more used to working with it, how much I need of each color, I might actually fill up my mini palette here with the colors that I think I would use mostly, because you can see this palette here, I haven't touched it in 3 days, and the paint is actually still wet in here, so it's still usable if I wanted to continue painting right now. And gouache can be reactivated even if it dries. You just take a little bit of water and you kind of let it soak into the dried paint, and eventually it gets all squishy again. Nice and creamy consistency that gouache has, and then you can start working again with it. But I have my whole set, which is a little bit heavy, and I would probably like to not carry all of this because I don't think I was really using colors like hot pink out there. Maybe if there were a lot of flowers, I could see that potentially being useful. I wasn't sure if there was going to be a lot of wildflowers or not where I went, so I brought it all. This is probably the heaviest item of this whole kit. Anyway, there we go. So these are just some of the other pieces that I've done. It's all with gouache and watercolor. Some of them are with mixtures. Like I use watercolor in the sky here because I really like the blues that I have in my watercolor set. And this was the rest of Point Reyes stuff. A lot of misty forests and some wildlife too that I came across.